Hello, this is William. I'm going to talk to you very quickly about sentences. We're not going to look at clauses or types of sentences like complex and compound. We're actually going to go right back to the start and just try and answer the question, what makes a sentence? How do we know that a sentence is a sentence when we see it? And in this little PowerPoint, we're going to find out that there are 4 ways of knowing if a sentence really is a sentence. So let's get started. So a sentence is just a string of words, but they follow some special rules in order to count as a sentence. So I can't just throw some words together and have a sentence, just like you can't really just throw a bunch of ingredients together and make a cake. Each sentence needs a subject. So I'm just going to grab my highlighter so I can do a little bit of highlighting here. If we have a look at this sentence, we can see we've got 3 words. Jimmy loves cats. And we have 2 nouns. One noun is Jimmy, the other noun is cats. So, nouns are just persons, places, or things. Jimmy and cat are both nouns. One of those is the subject. One of those nouns is what the sentence is all about. And I'm going to tell you that it's Jimmy. Jimmy is what this sentence is all about. And that's because we're being told what Jimmy's doing. Jimmy is loving something, in this case is cats. And of course, everyone loves cats, so that makes sense. Jimmy loves cats. Jimmy is what the sentence is all about. Let's have a look at another example. Jack and Jill went up Mount Everest. Okay, so we have more nouns here. If I get my yellow highlighter, we've got Mount Everest, and then we have Jack and Jill. So in this case, Jack and Jill we're going to treat almost like a plural noun as a noun altogether, even though it's 2 different people. Jack and Jill and Mount Everest. So we know a noun is the subject. It's what the it's what the sentence is all about if we're being told what that subject is doing. So we're being told what Jack and Jill are doing. They are going up Mount Everest, or they went up Mount Everest. Let me get my other highlighter here. There we go. But we aren't being told what Mount Everest is doing. There's no verb attached to it. But with Jack and Jill, we can see that they went up Mount Everest. So Jack and Jill are the subject. Okay, nice one. Every subject needs to do something. So we've already talked about this. Jimmy is the subject, so I'm going to highlight him in yellow. And Jimmy is loving. He's loving cats. That's what he's doing. Nice and simple. Every subject needs to do something. We might say needs to verb something because an action is shown usually by a verb, an action word like love. Okay, let's look at a new sentence. Lucy ate all of the chips again. Okay, well, let's find the nouns. So we have Lucy, she's a person. Chips, that's a thing. Okay, so which one is the subject? Which one is this sentence all about? Well, it's Lucy, because we're being told what Lucy's doing. She ate. She has eaten all of the chips. That's what she's doing. She's eating. We aren't being told what the chips are doing. I mean, we can guess. We know that the chips, well, they're probably sitting in a bag and then being eaten by Lucy. But we're being told in this sentence what Lucy is doing. She's eating or has eaten all of the chips. So Lucy is the subject and she's eating. That's what she's doing. But what about these other nouns we're hearing about, like Mount Everest or chips? Well, they have a special name as well. We call them objects. So every sentence has a subject, and every subject does something to an object. Now, not every sentence follows these rules. It's important to remember whenever we have rules, especially in English, not every word, every sentence, every bit of the language follows those rules. Not everyone follows those rules. But these are pretty good guidelines. So here are our 3 examples. We know that Jimmy is the subject in the first one. Jack and Jill are the subjects in the second sentence. Lucy is the subject of the third sentence. Those 3 things, those 4 people, are what these sentences are all about. And we can see what they're doing. So let's highlight. Jimmy is the subject of the first one. Jack and Jill are the subject of the second one. And Lucy is the subject of the third one. And this is what they're doing. Jimmy is loving. Jack and Jill are going up something, or they have been up something. They've climbed. And Lucy has eaten something. Okay, and now finally, we have to figure out what they're doing these things to. So Jimmy is loving. Okay, but what is he loving? Well, he's loving cats. That's a really dark highlighter. Okay. Jack and Jill, what are they doing? Well, they're going up, or they have been up Mount Everest. I'm gonna underline that one. Okay, Lucy is eating. What is she eating? Well, she's eating all of the chips. Nice and simple. And in fact, if we look carefully, we can see that we can actually mix these sentences up. So, for example, we could say, Jimmy ate all of the cats. We can take the subject of one sentence, the action or the verb of another, and the object of another one, and put them all together. And it makes a completely new sentence. Jimmy ate all of the cats. Okay, that's not very nice. Lucy loves chips. Cool. Jack and Jill ate Mount Everest. They don't really make sense, or it's a bit silly, but these are sentences that are grammatically correct. They all have a subject. We all know what those subjects are doing, and we all know what those subjects are doing that too. That's what makes a sentence. Finally, though, we have rule number 4, and as we said, they don't always have to follow the rules. Sentences need to make sense. Okay, so here's a string of words. The president dinosaur store-bought to the eggs flew and. Well, we know it doesn't make sense. For one thing, the period there at the very end isn't actually at the end, it's 2 words before the end, and periods go at the end of a sentence. So this doesn't really look right to me. But if we put them in the right order, the president flew to the store and bought dinosaur eggs. That does make sense. This is a sentence. Let's break it down like we have before. We have the president. We're being told what the president is doing. Flying, or has flown. Past tense is flew. Flew to the store and bought dinosaur eggs. So we actually have 2 things the president is doing. Buying something as well. And then we have the objects. So the president flew to the store. And the president bought dinosaur eggs. Nice. But anybody can tell you that this sentence does not make sense. Because it's really silly. Of course, this just doesn't happen. I guess it's possible, but it just doesn't happen. It needs to make sense, doesn't it? Well, that's because when we say a sentence needs to make sense, we mean it needs to make grammatical sense. It doesn't have to be realistic. Make sense or sensible and realistic are 2 different things. So the president flew to the store and bought dinosaur eggs. We can imagine that. All of the words make sense. They all fit together. It makes grammatical sense. It's a sentence, even though it's not realistic. Okay, so let's go through these 2 sentences here and see if we can find the subject, the verb, or what that subject is doing, the object, and we're also going to make sure that the sentence actually makes sense as well. So let's have a look at these. We've got my brother can play 3 guitars at once, and breakdancing is Boris's favorite style of dancing. Well, let's look at the first one. We have 2 nouns here, so we've got brother, and we've also got guitars, which is here. So brother is a person, guitars are things, so they're both nouns. Only one of them, though, is the subject. And it's actually brother, my brother, because we're actually being told what my brother's doing. We aren't being told what the guitars are doing. So the sentence is all about my brother. And what is my brother doing? Well, he's playing guitars. So that makes guitars actually the object. It looks kind of a bit funny if I use 2 highlighters there. Let's have a look at the next sentence. Breakdancing is Boris's favorite style of dancing. Now this isn't a very fair sentence because it's very tricky. So I've put this sentence in as a little bit of an example as to how sometimes looking for subjects and what those subjects are doing can be much more difficult than a sentence like Jimmy loves cats. We've got breakdancing. That's a noun because it's a type of dancing like river dance or tap. And then we have Boris, who's also a person, so that's a noun. So 2 nouns, but only one of them is the subject. And we have to decide, is the sentence all about Boris, or is it all about breakdancing? And if ever I'm stuck and I don't know what to do, I will see which one makes more sense. Sometimes if we have a question with more than one answer, and we're not sure which one is right, it's best to choose the answer that seems to make the most sense. Sometimes we get to the point where we feel like none of the answers look right at all. Go for the one that makes the most sense. So let's imagine Boris is the subject. I don't know, but I'm going to imagine it is. Do we get told what Boris is doing? Well, I can imagine he's breakdancing, but we don't actually get told that in the sentence. It says breakdancing is Boris's favorite style of dancing. We don't know what he's doing right now. In fact, we don't get told really anything about what he's doing. Now let's imagine breakdancing is the subject. Do we get told what breakdancing is doing? And this is where it's confusing, because really breakdancing is just a thing. It doesn't do anything. It's just a style of dancing. River dance doesn't do anything. The waltz doesn't do anything. So in this sentence, we have to think a little bit more abstract, maybe a bit weird, I'd say. So breakdancing is actually doing something here. It is being Boris's favorite. That's what it's doing. And if you can understand that, you can understand why sometimes looking at sentences and deciding if they make sense, if they're all full sentences, can be a little bit confusing. But breakdancing is actually the object here, and what it's doing is being Boris's favorite style of dancing. So it's unlikely you ever really come across complex sentences like this and then you have to decode them and figure out what the subject is. But in the test, for the high school equivalency, you'll be expected to know. You'll be expected to know what a subject is. You'll be expected to know what a verb is or an object. And if you do know, you stand a much greater chance of succeeding. Other than that, that's it. So what's a sentence? It is a string of words that has a subject, tells you what the subject is doing, and it tells you what object the subject is doing that to, and it makes sense. Usually. You can see some of the exceptions to this in the guide, but other than that, I look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.